Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. India's external affairs minister meets his Russian counterpart in Moscow and says that the shared goal of both countries is to expand bilateral trade in a balanced and sustainable manner. China's President Xi Jinping attends Tibet's 60th anniversary celebrations and urges ethnic unity and religious harmony in a region where Beijing is accused of rights abuses. Taiwan's government plans to increase its 2026 defense budget to more than 3% of GDP as it faces U.S. pressure to invest more in its own protection. Uganda agrees to a deal with the United States to take deported migrants, but on the condition the deportees should not have criminal records and not be unaccompanied minors. And the Red Cross says Israel's expanded offensive in the Gaza Strip, aimed at conquering the besieged territory and targeting the remaining Hamas strongholds, is intolerable. We begin today with the latest in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Moscow has drawn yet another hard line, declaring that it must be part of any international talks on Ukraine's security. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Wednesday insisted that discussing security guarantees seriously without Russia is, in his words, a road to nowhere.
We cannot agree with the fact that it is now proposed to resolve collective security issues without Russia. This will not work. We have already explained more than once that Russia does not exaggerate its interests, but we will ensure our legitimate interests firmly and harshly. And I am sure that the West, and above all the United States, understands perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia. This is a road to nowhere.
Now, Lavrov dismissed European diplomacy as an aggressive escalation as well as a clumsy effort to sway President Donald Trump. He also said that China, Russia's closest ally in the war, should also be among Ukraine's guarantors, reviving a proposal first floated in Turkey back in 2022.
What diplomatic steps have you noticed in the European Union? Before evaluating them, they need to be seen. So far, we see only a fairly aggressive escalation of the situation, rather clumsy and unethical attempts to change the position of the Trump administration and the U.S. president personally.
Now, the comments come just days after President Donald Trump welcomed his Ukrainian counterpart, President Volodymyr Zelensky, and a group of European leaders to the White House. President Trump has cast himself as a deal maker, attempting to steer both sides towards settlements more than 3 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But for now, the path to dialogue is riddled with challenges. On Thursday, President Zelensky signaled he's open to meeting Putin, but only after Ukraine secures firm security guarantees. He said his country wants a clear architecture of security guarantees within the next 7 to 10 days. And based on that, he envisions a trilateral meeting involving President Trump. Zelensky even suggested venues such as Switzerland, Austria, and Turkey, countries he described as acceptable and neutral enough to host such critical talks. He made it clear also that he doesn't want China playing a role in guaranteeing Ukraine's security while citing Beijing's alleged support for Moscow. Now, Lavrov, meanwhile, avoided any direct mention of a potential Putin-Zelensky summit, but did stress that any such encounter would need to be prepared with meticulous care.
The main thing is that any formats, 1+1, 1+2, multilateral formats, of which there are also many, including within the UN, All these formats are included not so that someone writes in the newspapers the next morning or shows it on TV in the evening or gossips on social networks trying to skim off the propaganda foam, but so that step by step, gradually, starting from the expert level and then going through all the necessary stages, summits are prepared.
Проходя все необходимые ступени для того, чтобы готовить саммиты.
Now, Trump announced this week that he'd begun the arrangements for the first meeting between the two leaders since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Meanwhile, European leaders are exploring what post-conflict security guarantees for Ukraine might look like, even as Russian officials warn that NATO troops on Ukrainian soil would cross a red line. On Wednesday, the NATO Military Committee convened a virtual meeting, and the alliance stressed its support for what it called a just, credible, and durable peace. Now, as talks happen, fighting continues on the ground. In fact, on Thursday, Zelensky said Russian forces are building up troops along the southern front line, which Moscow claims as its own. And Russian attacks on Ukraine overnight killed at least one, and as of now, the divide remains clear. However, Trump is pressing for a dialogue, Europe is sketching out guarantees, and Russia is stalling and setting conditions. Now, whether the next handshake will be a step towards peace remains an open question. On Wednesday, here in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C., two Americas collided. Inside Union Station, Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller handed out burgers to the troops deployed in D.C., calling it a mission to reclaim law and order. Outside, protesters chanted, "Free D.C.," accusing the Trump administration of turning Washington into an occupied zone. One America trusts boots on the ground, and the other trusts its people. And caught in between is the Capitol itself, a city that now mirrors the nation's deepest divide over power, safety, and the true meaning of freedom. Here's more from the ground.
We need money for healthcare, and housing, and climate justice. From DC to Palestine.
On the steps of Union Station, Washington echoed with anger. Protesters waved banners, "Free to see, free Palestine, free us all." Their voices clashed with the scene inside, where Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller were flipping burgers for troops at a Shake Shack. They came to thank the troops, but instead landed in a chorus of boos. The National Guard was deployed in Washington, D.C. last week on President Donald Trump's orders. Nearly 1,900 troops deployed, many flown in from Republican-led states. Their mission, the administration says, to restore law and order in the city. Vance, flanked by cameras and soldiers, declared that some law and order had been restored.
If you look at what's happened in Washington, D.C. in just the past 9 days, we've seen a 35% reduction in violent crime. We've seen over a 50% reduction in robberies.
But outside, the chants did not stop. They only grew louder as the vice president spoke. Protesters accused Trump of turning the Capitol into an occupied zone. They booed, they heckled, they called the mission a sham. They accused the administration of pouring money into tanks and troops instead of housing and health care. They questioned the deployment of the National Guard in a city that has a sharply falling crime rate.
We have workers and everyday people terrified to go to work around Washington, D.C. We have communities showing up for their neighbors. The power is in the people, and that is why Hegseth and J.D. Vance are here today, because they're afraid, and what they think that they need to do is to clean up crime and to stand for democracy is bringing in tanks and troops as they cut funding for healthcare and for housing.
We know that crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. So why is the National Guard here? It's all for show. You can look out in front of Union Station and see it's all for show. They leave at 10 p.m. every night. When does crime happen? They're not doing anything about crime. It's absurd. It's all a distraction.
Their voices thundered against the message inside the Union Station, because while the protesters demanded justice, Vance pushed back. He claimed the station was overrun by vagrants, drug addicts, the chronically homeless, and the mentally ill, and even dismissed the demonstrators by calling them crazy.
And I think you hear these guys outside here screaming at us. Of course, these are a bunch of crazy protesters, but I'll tell you, a couple of years ago when I brought my kids here, they were being screamed at by violent vagrants, and it was scaring the hell out of my kids. And one of the things that we've done already in Union Station in just 9 days is we've made it a place where people can walk around safely.
Stephen Miller took it a step further, calling the protesters crazy communists.
And the voices that you hear out there, those crazy communists, they have no roots, they have no connections to the city, they have no families they're raising in this city, they have no one that they're sending to school in this city, they have no jobs in this city, they have no connections to this community at all. But they're the ones who've been advocating for the 1%, the criminals, the killers, the rapists, the drug dealers. And I'm glad they're here.
Washington police figures shows violent crime is at a 30-year low. Murders, carjackings, assaults, all have sharply declined since 2023. Yet the overwhelmingly Democratic U.S. Capitol faces allegations from Republican politicians that it is overrun by crime. Trump has seized control. He federalized the city's police, ordered troops from states like Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Ohio, stationed them across the downtown. For Trump and his allies, this is about restoring order. For critics, it is about militarizing democracy's capital. In the heart of America's capital, freedom is the slogan, but occupation has become the scene. And as protesters cry, "Free DC," the city built as a symbol of liberty is learning just how contested that world can be.
And now to Syria, where U.S. forces carried out a pre-dawn raid targeting a member of the Islamic State, or ISIS. The mission took place in Idlib province and marks the latest American operation against remnants of the extremist network. Now, according to U.S. officials and Syrian security forces, the raid began around 2 a.m. local time in the town of Atme in northwestern Syria. U.S. helicopters and drones provided air cover while ground troops executed the actual assault.
It started last night after 2 a.m. We were asleep on the balcony. We went inside. We couldn't sleep. There was a shooting and loud noises. We didn't know what was happening, and it was dark. I couldn't see anything from the balcony.
Syrian forces cordoned off the neighborhood, but American soldiers led the raid. Now, according to reports, the target tried to escape but was killed. The man was reportedly an Iraqi national married to a French woman. Now, what happened to his wife remains unclear. Syrian state media later identified him as someone named Ali, one of the most dangerous men wanted for mobilizing ISIS sleeper cells in Syria. The Pentagon has not yet issued a formal statement, but a U.S. official reportedly confirmed the raid was aimed at a suspected high-value ISIS member. One resident also said that U.S. armed forces remained on rooftops of nearby homes for nearly 2 hours. He also heard someone speaking Arabic with what he described as an Iraqi accent.
They went up to our neighbor's roof here and our neighbor's roof there. Of course, those who came to me here, they all speak English. They didn't speak anything else, just English. But on the roof of Assad's house there, the man was speaking, and his accent was apparently Iraqi.
Now, ISIS, also known as ISIL, once controlled territory half the size of the United Kingdom, stretching across Iraq and Syria with Raqqa as its capital. The group became infamous for mass killings, the enslavement of Yazidi women, and the beheading of foreign hostages. Though it lost its territory and governance structure by 2019, its fighters, however, remain active in the region and abroad. It's the second known U.S. raid in northern Syria since longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad was ousted last December. And the new government, led by President Ahmed al-Shara, has pledged to prevent any resurgence of ISIS and is cooperating with the U.S.-led coalition. Wednesday's raid is not an isolated incident, however. In fact, in July, the Pentagon said its forces killed a senior ISIS leader along with two of his adult sons during a raid in the Aleppo province. Idlib province, where this latest raid occurred, has long been a hiding spot for senior ISIS leaders. In fact, U.S. Special Forces killed 2 members of there, one in 2022 and another in 2019. ISIS continues to carry out deadly attacks. In fact, this year in May, the group ambushed Syrian government forces And in June, a gunman stormed a church in Damascus, killing at least 25 people before detonating a suicide bomb. The Interior Ministry blamed ISIS for the massacre. Analysts say that while ISIS no longer holds territory, it remains a threat. Its networks continue to launch sporadic but deadly operations across Syria, Iraq, Africa, and Afghanistan. So while ISIS has lost its so-called caliphate years ago, the latest U.S. raid in Idlib is a reminder that the group's leaders are still being hunted and its fighters remain a danger in Syria and beyond. And now more danger in the skies that's raising fresh concerns about aviation safety in America. A Delta Airlines Boeing 737 jet experienced a mid-air scare earlier this week after a part of the airplane's wing broke off before landing in Texas. Delta Airlines Flight 1893 was flying from Orlando International to Austin International Airport on Tuesday when passengers noticed something had partially broken away from the back of the wing. A video recorded by passengers showed the flap dangling behind the wing as the plane flew at hundreds of miles an hour, thousands of feet in the air. Take a look.
You know the back thing? It didn't broken fully.
Now, in a statement to the media, Delta Airlines said that after landing, it was observed that a portion of the left wing's flap was not in place. The airline added that the aircraft was taken out of service for maintenance and apologized for the inconvenience caused. There were about 62 passengers and 6 crew members on board the flight, and reports confirmed that no one was injured. Flaps are surfaces on the back of the wing that extend during takeoff and landing. By moving downward, they change the shape of the wing, generating more lift at lower speeds and allowing for slower, more controlled landings. These components are crucial for shorter takeoffs and landings. And the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has confirmed it's investigating the incident. And this case adds to a growing list of aviation mishaps involving Delta Airlines this year. In July, an Atlanta-bound Delta flight made an emergency landing at Los Angeles International Airport after its engine caught fire shortly after takeoff. In April, passengers were evacuated from another Delta plane after an engine fire broke out prior to departure from Orlando International Airport. And back in February, a Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis crashed, flipped over, and caught fire on the runway at Toronto Pearson International Airport while attempting to land. While it's also noteworthy is that some of these incidents involve jets manufactured by Boeing, a company already under heavy scrutiny since the crash of an Air India flight in June that claimed over 240 lives on board. The plane maker's 737 model involved in this latest incident has been closely watched by aviation regulators around the world. The MAX version in particular has been troubled since 2 deadly crashes in 2018 and 2019. Worries surged again last year after a door plug blew off a MAX operated by Alaska Airlines, exposing systemic safety and production issues at Boeing. As a result, the U.S. government capped production of the 737 MAX at an estimated 38 planes per month. Now, against this backdrop, the Delta Airlines incident may have ended without injuries, but it has once again put a spotlight on the aviation industry's struggle to regain public confidence and meet safety expectations in the skies. We end today with a tribute to a judge who turned his courtroom into a place of kindness and hope. Frank Caprio, the longtime Providence judge whose cases went viral for his mercy and humanity, has died at the age of 88 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. Known to millions through his show Caught in Providence, Caprio spent decades on the bench reminding the world that justice could also be compassionate. We end today with a look back at the remarkable life and legacy he leaves behind.
In a world too often defined by harshness and hurry, one gentle judge from Providence, United States reminded us, in a small city court beneath the glare of courtroom lights, one man turned routine justice into a global lesson in kindness. He was none other than Judge Frank Caprio.
Okay, hi, my name is Frank Caprio. I am Chief Judge of the Providence Municipal Court.
Known as the world's nicest judge, his life and legacy touched millions far beyond the city he called home. And today, the world bid him a final goodbye. Judge Caprio passed away peacefully at the age of 88 after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. His death was announced on his official Instagram account. News of his passing rapidly spread online, evoking an outpouring of grief from fans worldwide. Rhode Island's governor issued a heartfelt statement and ordered the state flag lowered to half-mast in his honor. Born into an Italian-American family in Providence, Judge Caprio served for decades on the city's municipal court bench before retiring in 2023. But it was his empathetic approach, marked by patience and humor, that captured the hearts of millions. His courtroom wasn't about harsh sentences or rigid rules. It was about understanding the human story behind every ticket, every fine, every disputed case. From parking violations to small infractions, Judge Caprio met each defendant with patience and kindness. He listened intently to single mothers, struggling workers, and the elderly. Often he would waive fines or offer second chances, his rulings conveying mercy as much as justice. This uncommon approach earned him not only respect of his community but the attention of a global audience. His show, Caught in Providence, brought these courtroom moments to millions, with clips widely shared across social media platforms, inspiring viewers worldwide. Among the most beloved were videos of Judge Caprio calling children to the bench, engaging them warmly as they helped pass judgment on their parents. Moments that highlighted his belief in family and humanity. In another, he's seen listening sympathetically to a woman whose son was killed. His unique way got his show nominated for 3 Daytime Emmys, with Judge Caprio earning 2 of his own nominations last year. As tributes pour in from across the world, Judge Frank Caprio's message endures. Justice is not about rules, but mercy, kindness, and dignity. Even in the toughest moments, he showed that compassion can prevail.
Remember me in your prayers.
His legacy will continue to inspire millions, far beyond the courtroom in Providence, and in the hearts of everyone touched by his kindness.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.